Good morning, church. Welcome to Daily Hope. My name is Joan Stevenson. I'm the Children's Ministry Director and just got home from a couple weeks in Ecuador with teams from our church. I was thinking about things I've learned from my dad. I'm about to go visit him. And one of the things that my dad used to do when I was growing up that I thought was really weird at the time was if we were watching TV and a commercial came on, he would often talk back to the television. Now, I'm curious if any of the rest of you had parents who did this where they would talk back at the television and he would basically point out what the advertiser was trying to do to get me to buy the thing that they wanted me to buy. At the time, I'm sure I rolled my eyes and said a lot of exasperated dad and heavy sighs. But as I look back on it now, what my dad was trying to do was teach me how to think for myself, to think critically, to be able to analyze what was being communicated to me so that I could make really good decisions and live with wisdom. And the book of Proverbs, that is what Solomon is trying to accomplish. In these chapters specifically, starting in chapter 10 and today in chapter 11, Solomon is trying to impart wisdom to his son about all sorts of things. And what he's doing is he's taking this abstract pie in the sky faith in God and making it really practical for everyday life. In the book of wisdom, in the book of Proverbs, there's wisdom, and sometimes Solomon lays things out in contrast, like the righteous do this, but the wicked do this, or the generous do this and the stingy do that. So there's these comparisons that happen. I love how Eugene Peterson says, wisdom is the art of living skillfully in whatever actual conditions we find ourselves. And I think that's important because the actual conditions we find ourselves are very different than when Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. But yet the wisdom that's there is timeless. It holds truth for today as well. So we're just going to look at one section of Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11 talks about the righteous and the wicked. It talks about leadership and having many advisors. It talks about living uprightly. It talks about how we use our tongue. It talks about not gossiping and slandering and how that backfires on us. One of my favorite funny Proverbs is in chapter 11. Like a gold ring and a pig's snout is a woman of beauty who shows no discretion. You know, sometimes Solomon just paints this funny picture for us. It's to get us to pay attention to something. But in Proverbs 11:24, he turns towards the subject of generosity. And we often think that to be generous means we have to have a lot of money. And I just got back from 2 weeks in Ecuador where some of the most generous people I met were people who had us in a home to share a meal with a concrete floor, a one-story home built out of cinder blocks with maybe a room or two for 4 or more kids to share, as well as the husband and wife, and a small little kitchen. And they served us a meal of lentils and rice through our one meal program with kids around the world that was so generous because of their willingness to open their home to strangers. I learned a lot from that situation. But in Proverbs 11:24, he says, one man gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. In 25, a generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. You see, giving freely has nothing to do with how many zeros are behind our paycheck. Giving freely, there's a wisdom in being generous, because when we are generous with others, people are generous in return. But when we hold back, when we keep things to ourselves, then it doesn't open the door for others to be generous with us. In fact, people tend to see those who are stingy and hold things for themselves, and they don't become friends with that person. In the long run, it really hurts us when we kind of protect ourselves, and that's what stinginess is. And a generous man will prosper. In other words, when we live a life of being generous towards others, God's blessing towards us is prosperity. And I don't mean that like if you give somebody $10, then you're going to get $100 back. God's prosperity towards us can come in a lot of different ways. But when we refresh others by being generous, we will find ourselves refreshed. And so, church, today, as you go about the day and read Proverbs 11, I just would encourage you to think about generosity and how you are being generous with others and how you are being generous with the God who gave you everything that you have anyway. Have a great day, church.